Hi, my name is Matea and I recently started this channel where I talk about my own perspective on magic and spirituality. If you've ever experienced a series of strange and meaningful coincidences and you're wondering if it's either your brain finding patterns in events or is it actually a spiritually significant sign, this video is for you. This idea that our brain seeks and finds patterns comes from research in neurobiology. And it says that our brain sometimes notices patterns that aren't there. Unfortunately, most neurobiologists today are hardcore materialists, so most of their research will be presented as favoring materialism even when they don't. Materialism is this idea, this model of reality where only physical matter exists and our consciousness and the contents of our consciousness somehow arises from neuronal activity, from the activity of our brain. From this point of view, our souls, spirits, higher power, our highest purpose cannot exist due to our consciousness being just a byproduct of evolution. This is why most materialist scientists will reject anything that has to do with spirituality, including signs and synchronicities. On the other hand, synchronicity is a term coined by a famous Swiss psychologist, Carl Gustav Jung, who described it as a meaningful coincidence. Jung was very much against materialism, and he chose another model of reality, which is dual aspect monism, which he claimed that described our reality and our experiences with our psyches much better. Dual aspect monism is a model of reality which presents whole reality as this one great numinous thing that we as humans can experience through two different aspects, which are the psyche and the objective physical world. The psyche and the objective physical world interact with each other all the time because in essence they are the same thing, the same numinous source. Synchronicities are events through which we can notice this interaction between our psyches and the outside world. And they come in many shapes and forms. Synchronistic events can happen in various different ways, but one common example is when you suddenly start thinking about someone. Like something reminds you of someone, and briefly after you see that person and you haven't seen them in a while. That's a synchronicity. All synchronicities are meaningful because according to Jung, meaning is what brings two or many events together, creating, in a noticeable way, creating a synchronicity. In this case, and in general, meaning is not some outside force that affects us, but rather a way that we as humans interpret certain events that show us this numinous spiritual nature of reality. So how do we know if this strange series of events or thoughts plus events is created by this numinous force, or is it just our brain seeking pattern? Neurobiology as a science only studies mechanisms of the brain. It studies how our brain works what our brain does when we think and feel things, but it doesn't tell us what thoughts and feelings are, and it certainly cannot do that with the current tools that science has, and it most certainly doesn't study meaning. Meaning falls under the realm of philosophy and even psychology, and it cannot be studied scientifically under laboratory circumstances. And this mechanism that the brain uses to notice patterns is used by the brain in almost any circumstance that requires perception, including noticing faces, remembering faces, predicting events so we can prepare, survive, noticing when something is off. This doesn't negate the fact that some events are genuinely more meaningful than others. It just means the mechanism that our brain uses to perceive those events is the same that our brain uses for basically everything. All synchronicities are both meaningful and are noticed by our brain's ability to notice patterns. Synchronicities happen all the time because this numinous force doesn't start working one time and stop working another time. It's working all the time. We just don't notice it. And we don't notice it because we're not connected to our own meaning all the time. So what does it mean to be connected to your own meaning? People usually start seeing more synchronicities than usual when they begin a spiritual practice, or even when they start healing a trauma that has been blocking them spiritually. To be connected to your true meaning means to see meaning in life. When you think about things that give your life more purpose, more meaning, are more inspirational to you, more frequently, more clearly, more intuitively, that is when you begin to align yourself with your true will, with your true purpose. It's called true will in Telema, and Carl Jung calls this process individuation, which means that you are connecting yourself back with your source, with your own true self. There is one problem with synchronicities, and it's the real reason why people ask this question, if the synchronicity is real or is it your brain playing tricks on you. And that is the fact that we cannot always interpret synchronicities. How this numinous spiritual force works cannot be understood by mechanistic logic and reason. Yet sometimes we can rationally interpret synchronicities. But that doesn't mean that the synchronicities we don't understand yet are meaningless. From my own personal experience, it's better not to interpret synchronicities. Just write them down. You might understand them in a couple of months or even years. When you understand a synchronicity immediately, clearly, with the feeling of being connected, then the interpretation of what the synchronicity means is most likely right. But if you try to rationally force an interpretation onto a synchronicity, then it's most likely wrong. My advice for people who are starting out with synchronicities is number one, don't overthink. Number two, write everything down. Number three, don't hype them up. Sometimes our intense, happy emotions can distort the reality, and those high expectations can also distort our perception of synchronicities. Number four, stay clear-minded. You can practice regular meditation or just walking in nature to stay clear-minded. Number five is you interpret your own synchronicities. Don't ask any random person to interpret it for you, and don't listen to people who think that they know your life better than you. And number six is use synchronicities for growth. When you think about growth, you can interpret synchronicities in a much cleaner way, let's say. This idea that synchronicities are nothing but our brains finding patterns that aren't there is just a reductionist, materialist, debunker explanation for synchronicities. If you're already balls deep into spirituality and magic, this doesn't make any sense to you. There are no fake synchronicities, just the ones we understand now and the ones we don't understand yet. Understanding synchronicities is not something extremely easy. It's hard, it's difficult. It requires a little bit of meditation, a little bit of mind calming techniques, research. You can research Carl Jung, you can also research anthropological literature on indigenous cultures, how they perceive signs. All that comes into play when you're trying to understand how to interpret synchronicities. Also, some people view everything as a sign, and that's not because they're actually experiencing meaningful coincidences. That's because they're forcing their thinking mind onto events. They're forcing signs, which is a product of the thinking human mind. It's not intuition. Intuition feels clean and connected, Rational thinking in this case feels like trying to solve an enormous equation and never getting the right answer. Thanks for watching my video, and I hope you found it useful. If not, I hope you found it interesting. Leave a comment if you have something to add, and subscribe if you see the potential in me. Bye!